is a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys?
Let's go, baby.
Are you ready for a break?
Yes.
Are you ready for a break?
Absolutely.
Ready for a break?
Yeah, and so much for that.
It's time for The Break on DallasCowboys.com.
We were on the break.
With Nick Eatman, David Hellman, Ambar Garcia, and Derek Eagleton.
It is Wednesday, May 5th, 2021, Season 16, Episode number 108. Welcome to the latest edition of The Break. We are presented by Geico. We are in the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star. Got Nick, Dave, and Amber with me. We're talking Cowboys draft. We're going to break down everything that we saw happen last weekend during the NFL draft. Cowboys had lots of selections. We're going to tell you how they're going to fit into this team. Before we do that, though, we need to catch up on a little news. I want to start first with Leighton Van Der Esh. Cowboys decided Monday that they were not going to decline to take his fifth-year option. My question for you guys is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of the Cowboys making this decision? Let's start with you, Nick.
Well, the advantages are that they don't have to set the floor of his contract negotiations at $9 million per season, because that's sort of what happens when you do like the let's say like when Dak and D-Law they got the franchise tag, and then even though they wanted to do a long-term deal, it's like, all right, well, this is franchise tag for is $20 million or for D-Law, so this is where it needs to start. And so I think if you're doing negotiations, if you did that, I believe that you'd have to kind of start it at $9 million. So you don't have to do that. I don't think that means that they're not going to keep him on the team or they're going to try to make him, but they don't have to be guaranteed $9 million, I think, for next year.
Yeah, the advantage is that they're not on the hook. And in addition to what Nick just said, they're not on the hook to pay that. I mean, if you guarantee the option, you're paying that in 2022 no matter what happens. So, I mean, if he, and God forbid, knock on wood, but if he tore his ACL week 2 of this season, that's still something that you got to deal with. So it gives you financial flexibility and the freedom to make that decision in the future as opposed to committing long term, which typically when you guarantee the option, it's almost like ceremonial because you're like, we will have a long term deal worked out before you even start on that fifth-year option, by and large. So it just gives you flexibility.
Does that also mean that they are okay with the idea of not having him? Because when you do this, that means that he has the ability to become a free agency. If he doesn't want if he doesn't want to accept whatever deal you put in front of him, he can walk. And does that signal that the Cowboys are like, we're kind of okay with that if it gets to that point?
I think that was evident in the draft. I think that because of the draft, I think they became okay with that more so than they were, earlier in the week. I mean, they didn't know how the draft was going to go, but they got a couple of guys that probably changed their opinion about it, and they said it has no weight on that. But I don't know. I don't believe that. I don't think you can draft those two guys and say, well, it didn't affect the decision of Leighton Van Der Esh. I think it did.
I absolutely think it did, and Leighton and Jalen. I think getting obviously Micah Parsons and then Jabril Cox, who most people agree fell a little bit. He's more talented than his draft slot suggests. I think it gives them the flexibility to make decisions on both of those guys. And I love that. I love not being painted into a corner at any position on the depth chart. And I think that's exactly what they achieved.
Amber, do you think that was the right decision, Cowboys deciding not to take the fifth-year option?
Absolutely. How can you, with someone that has been hurt as much as he has, I think that you shouldn't take that kind of rushed chance, even though they're saying that they're still interested in a long-term deal, which is kind of what you have to say. You don't want to let the player know that you're kind of done with them and don't care about them anymore. But I think they thought it very well, and it was a smart move not to do it, especially after the deal that you had made with Jalen Smith and the way he performed last year. And we talk about him all the time, but I don't know if I really don't know how the Cowboys truly feel about signing or extending Jalen Smith's contract and seeing the way that he's been performing since. So I think they thought it through very well, and it was a good decision.
Yeah, I think there will be a lot of things that will be decisions the Cowboys will have to make at the linebacker position over the next couple years, because at this point, I don't think that after this year. I don't think Jalen's contract is one they couldn't get rid of if they chose to do that. Obviously, LVE would be a free agent at that point. They've got 2 young guys they just drafted that are on rookie deals, so you're not paying a ton of money, relatively speaking, for those guys. So Cowboys have a lot of decisions to make at linebacker, and we'll see how that plays out for them. Let's talk about the draft. Let's dive in a little bit more to that. And I first want to start just kind of big picture. I want each of you guys are going to go around the table, and I want you to tell me your biggest like from the draft, the thing you liked the most that the Cowboys did during the draft. Let's start first with you, Dave.
The thing that I like the most is probably they ensured themselves in this linebacker conversation. And, I'm not shy or reluctant to say Micah Parsons is not who I would have drafted even after trading back. That's okay. He's a hell of a talented player. And again, I've said this a few times. I wonder, and they certainly don't regret drafting Micah, but if they had known that they could have gotten Jabril Cox later, I wonder if it would have affected what they did. And obviously, there's no way to know that, but it's interesting. But 2 great players, 2 guys who bolstered the depth chart right away. And again, I love the flexibility. You're not married to Leighton Van Der Esh. You're not married to Jalen Smith. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do with both of those guys. Cox's big attribute is his ability in coverage, which is something this team hasn't had from a linebacker recently. And Parsons, what can't you do with him? He can rush the passer. He can blitz. He's athletic enough to drop in coverage. So I just, linebacker is a strength again, which it hasn't been in a couple of years. So I definitely like that a lot. The Parsons pick is, I don't have a problem with it, but adding Jabril Cox on top of that, I thought was really great.
I will caution one thing. We think it's a strength because we also thought,
sure.
2 years ago,
they got to get on the
2018. Well, 2018, we
it
thought
was
this
a strength in
core,
2018.
I know. I'm saying after we finished 2018, we thought the linebacker core was as good as any other position on the team, and we found out later not so much. So that's something for us to keep an eye on. Amber.
Well, to me, it was defense. The fact that most of it was defense, I was very pleased. Although most of these guys, I had no idea who they were, to be honest. Like, after the first pick, I'm like, okay, who is this guy? No idea, but get to learn about them a little bit more.
Same.
What?
Same
for you?
Oh, didn't know
a lot
they
of
were?
names that I feel like I've never heard
I'd
before.
not heard of one of the players after the first round.
You didn't hear about Cox?
Not until a couple days before. Not throughout the process, no. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should have. He picked off Arkansas in the middle of the game and almost scored. I don't know why I wasn't watching that.
I was about to say, you should have known that,
I was
right?
yelling, I'm sure. So I didn't hear the name.
You probably throwing stuff you didn't miss. Yeah,
I'm
you
a
missed that
remote
part.
thrower.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Anyways,
Rob will tell you that.
despite all that, I think that the fact that with 11 guys, and most of them being defensive players, you have a higher chance of hitting some right, getting some players that will turn out okay. Because the previous weeks, we went through the past drafts and we looked at these talents and how they turned out over the years. I think that with the amount of players on the defensive side of the ball, now you have a bigger chance or higher chance for you to get a couple that will turn out all right. So I'm feeling good. Don't know many of them, but I'm hoping that a couple of them will turn out all right and will actually help this defense.
Biggest like, Nick?
Biggest like I like the fact that when you look at the themes, okay, there's 4 themes that I could come up with. Number 1, a lot of defense. Defense was the theme of it. Number 2, big players. Big quarterbacks, big run stoppers, big linebacker, big safety, just bigger players. Receivers huge too. So just size. Third theme is that you better know how to pronounce these guys because they're not easy. And the fourth
I'm
one,
not looking forward to that part. Yeah,
is they got some issues. Some of them got some history to them, and a lot of them have have confidence walking in the door. I don't know how many comparisons we saw. Well, I'm going to be the best of this, and I'm going to be the best, or I'm a better Richard Sherman. You're like, wow. So confidence is not something that's really lacking here. So there's a lot of themes. I like them all, but I like the fact that size was a big issue here, and they look like they addressed it.
Okay, so let's flip it. Biggest dislike, Dave.
Kind of what Nick just touched on. I said this over the weekend, and still think it is. I think this is the draft with the most boomer bust potential that I have ever covered. I think 2 or 3 years from now, we could look back and say, holy crap, this was amazing. Look at, they found like 2 Pro Bowlers and 4 really quality starters, contributors. I think we could also look back in 2 or 3 years and be like, yep, that's why they suck, because this draft class did not, they all washed out. And like there's especially with the big picks, there's a lot of concern. Micah, like the character issues with Micah, from everything I've heard, they don't concern me that much. Me and Kelsey Charles interviewed his defensive coordinator at Penn State yesterday and was very encouraged by what I heard. So that'll be on the site later this week. But like he's so raw. He hasn't turned 22 yet. He hasn't played in a year. He's only played linebacker for 2 years, by the way. So there's the potential that he's only scratching the surface. There's also the potential that this is going to be a heck of an adjustment for him. Like, it's hard to say. Kelvin Joseph, again, everything I've heard is that he's not like a bad guy. Like, you hear character concerns. I don't get the impression that he's a bad person. I've talked to people at LSU.
There's a difference,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've talked to people at LSU about this. Like, I heard rave reviews about like his work ethic and his character, but you talk about like, how focused are you? Can you handle being a professional football player and dedicating what you need to dedicate to being good at football? He's got a rap career. He was suspended from LSU's bowl game a couple years ago. So there's history that suggests that keeping him on the straight and narrow could be a bit of a challenge. And then obviously Josh Ball being a big one as well. I'm sorry.
I was all of them? We're going to go through all of the picks?
I think he's talking about the 3 that have the issues.
Okay.
With that being the weakness for him of this draft.
Okay.
Yeah, and so Josh Ball being the last one, which those are some really serious allegations,
right.
11 different allegations of domestic violence. That's not what you want to hear. So if all of these guys are ready to go and ready to embrace professionalism and all that stuff, it could be really great. If they're not, then it could lead to some problems. I will say, it seems like they drafted some really high character guys as well. I encourage anybody that hasn't done it to go read about Osa Odighizuwa's openness with mental health and what he's gone through with his family. Really fascinating. Chauncey Golston, high character guy. His coaches at Iowa loved him, and Jabril Cox as well. So done rambling now, but there's concerns there that we're not used to seeing. They drafted Randy Gregory. They've done this at times, but to take 3 big swings in one draft, it'll be interesting to see how it pans out.
Amber.
To piggyback on that, biggest dislike for me of this draft overall, just basically what I said to begin with, the fact that these were guys that I didn't know much about. And maybe that's on me, but to hear people like Nick saying he didn't either, it makes me feel better, Mm-hmm. But aside from that, once you start knowing about these guys and you hear the things that Dave just mentioned, and you're like, okay, I'm not one to judge, and I don't know much about them just yet. I don't know enough to form an opinion. But the fact that all of that is out there, it's like, okay, do we seriously always need to get someone that has some kind of like baggage with them? And we don't know, again, how that's all going to pan out. But after last year and seeing, and I wasn't in the locker room, but I feel like the past 2 years, kind of the dynamic and everyone kind of clicking together and just no drama and everything just kind of seems to be working out, and it appears to be working out as far as the people within that locker room. It makes me wonder, I'm like, are we going to go through one of those years again where you have someone that doesn't quite fit in? For example, Taco Charlton, that, he didn't have all that stuff on his back, but as far as like fitting in within the group, that does concern me. It does concern me whether someone will get suspended during the season. We don't need any of that happening again, especially on the defensive side of the ball, which seems to be always the area where a player gets suspended. But other than that, are they going to fit in? Are they going to fit in with the group and everybody else in there? So that's my biggest, I would say, dislike as of right now.
All right, Nick?
I didn't like the 2nd round pick. So I don't think that's we'll see. I don't think it's a good pick. You need that corner to come in and play. I understand that they took the best talented guy that they had, but if you're just talking about a dislike, I was really hoping the Raiders did not take Merrick in there right before, because I think that broke the tie. It was a 50-50 right there, and I think maybe they were going to take the cornerback anyways, but he just doesn't seem like he's fully committed to playing football. That's just what it seems like. I could be wrong. They do their homework. They do their homework way more than we do. So, but I don't know. I don't love the pick because I think you're counting on him so much, and there's 2 SEC teams that couldn't count on him.
So you answered the second part of my next question, so I want you to answer the first. Your favorite pick, and then your least favorite pick, obviously, was Kelvin Joseph.
Kentucky.
You got your big boy.
Yeah, and I really think 6th round, you can say, well, how much is he going to contribute? First of all, 6th rounders on this team, last few years, there's always one that seems to make us to stick. But I think that he's going to have a role because who else looks like him? Who else can do what he does? And they had a higher grade on him. So, I don't know. I mean, there's not many 6th round picks that the defensive coordinator actually talks about him in the press conference of where they're going to play. So I like the Bohanna pick. And if I'm wrong about Joseph, that's great. I mean, I just think they need to count on him so much, and he's going to have to mature. And maybe he will. Maybe being here and the Cowboys can kind of help with that. So we'll see. But I mean, that's if you're just going to say which one, I would say that one. That's one. But my favorite one was Bohanna.
All right, Dave.
I promise it has nothing to do with where I went to school, but I just think Jabril.
Yes, it does.
No,
Yeah.
it really doesn't.
But let me tell you why it does. The reason why it does is because you've watched him so much, so
sure.
you know what you love about him, right?
That's the irony. I mean, I watched him all last year, but that was the only year he was there. Like, this isn't a guy that I've followed since he was 18.
True.
I just think he's a hell of a football player. He's a high character guy. We talked about him on this show.
We did, and I love his story. His story is good.
He literally was like, North Dakota State's not hard enough for me. I want to go to the SEC, and he balled out. He was the only good thing about LSU's team last year.
I like that.
And I don't know this for sure, but I wonder because I bet they started talking about him. No, I know they did in the 3rd round, like pick 75. They were like he was in the conversation from then on, and I wonder if they had known that they could have gotten him on day 2 for sure. Maybe they draft Rashawn Slater. I don't know that. Maybe they still draft Micah Parsons, and that's fine. But it's interesting to think about. He can cover. And that's what you need in a linebacker in the modern NFL. Again, like not worried about his focus or his commitment or any of that stuff. And they got him at pick 115, so that's a great value, just awesome value. I don't know. I'm not here to judge the guy. He wasn't charged with the crime, but the Josh Ball stuff, like you don't want to have to think about stuff like that. Preferably, like you don't want to have to say, "Oh, what's this guy doing when he goes home?" I don't know. And again, was not charged with the crime. Not my place, but it just kind of makes you feel icky a little bit when you hear stuff like that. I really do. And we'll throw in, the draft nerds, the Nashon Wright one. It's funny because I feel like people are going to judge this draft more on Nashon Wright than Micah Parsons because like everybody is like, well, Micah Parsons is the most talented defender in this class. Like you gotta draft him, and if it doesn't work out, that's just the draft. But Nashon Wright. The Cowboys are much higher on this guy than seemingly everybody else. And that doesn't mean they're wrong, but it is going to make that really interesting as we see how his career unfolds.
And it does also make an interesting point of where could you have gotten him if everybody else. But that's hard. This year, unlike every other year, usually your scouts are out and they're running into other scouts as they're on the road. Yeah. So they're kind of getting an idea of what teams think of players. They didn't have that this year.
Will talked about that on Saturday night, Will McClay, and I love it because he's right. And it's the same thing. Like, if you go back and listen to our draft coverage, Dane Brugler does more work on the draft than anybody. I respect him implicitly. I think he had a 6th, 7th round grade on Wright. But the minute an NFL team drafts a guy in the 3rd round, you start thinking like, well, shoot, like, did I miss something? Did they miss something? And all of a sudden you're second guessing yourself. Again, respect a lot of other people that do this for a living as well. But then they go home and watch Wright. And they're like, oh yeah, like I can sort of see it, like maybe like a 4th round, and like all of a sudden, the fact that a team was willing to draft him 99th, it affects your opinion. It just does. Yep. And so I'll be fascinated to see, not having that that group think where scouts go out on the road and they watch the workout, and the guy from the Cardinals is like, this guy's a baller, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, like I guess he is. So it's going to be fascinating. Are the Cowboys a lot smarter than everybody else, or did they get this way wrong? It's going to be fascinating.
Yep.
I got a point to that too, but I'll finish here.
Amber, favorite and least favorite.
Favorite would have to be Parsons. One, because it's the one I know the most about, but two, because after Horn and Surtain were gone, I mean, the one position that I really wanted the Cowboys to draft was linebacker, aside from cornerback. So I was glad that they did address that position, and I said it last week on the show, that would be a high, and it is a very high necessity right now for the team. So that would be my most liked pick, especially because of the position. And the least one, I guess Joseph, second round, just because as soon as he was picked, I mean, here comes Nick to the whole room and starts telling his whole background and everything that.
Well,
and
I just was listening to the draft show, and I was like,
Right.
no, it was before all that.
Dane laid it all out on the draft show.
Well, Dave actually knew this was happening way before the draft started.
Yeah.
I mean, you were plugged in on this one, and he knew this was going to be the guy. So we're like, let's look into it, and then just hearing more stuff, and you're like, Argh. So
yeah,
I was,
you can't. You walked in there as soon as they made the pick, and then he starts telling, "Oh man, have you heard about this guy?" And then he goes on and tells the whole story of everything that he's dealing with, and then you're like, okay, it puts an opinion. It puts, so everybody in the room is like, oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So you start forming an opinion based on that. So instantly I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. We got a guy that has all that with him.
Football rap.
I know.
But he's not the first. He's not the first professional athlete to have a rap career and be able to do the job well.
No,
right?
not at all. It's just I mean, let's don't get into it. I mean, like, I think the priorities, though, that would be one that you would question. And there was a little moment there, I guess, when maybe in between schools when you weren't sure what he wanted to do. And he's not the first 21, 22-year-old in the world that didn't know what he wanted to do with his life. That happens all the time. So, I mean, I hope I'm wrong here. I mean, last year was a weird year to also gauge anybody of what's going on. But I wanted to make another point of what he was saying about like Nashon Wright and guys like that. I always throw out the Anthony Hitchens story. It's one of my favorite stories because I just remember him. He was a 6th or 7th round pick. Rod Marinelli just really loved what he could do for this defense. And I think when you're looking at the McShays and Mel Kipers and even Dane Brugler, they do these scouting reports for players for any scheme, for any team. They just grade them that way. And I think the Cowboys, obviously, like any team, they'll grade them based off of what their team is, and I mean, there was a cornerback from Washington that kind of fell. I don't know where he got drafted. Cornerback safety. Molden.
Like he was the next pick off the board.
Elijah Molden.
Yeah.
But like I mean, from what I heard, that they didn't know what to do with them. Dan Quinn was like, "Where do I play this guy?" So he didn't fit in his scheme, and where the Nashon Wright, maybe some teams may not even had him rated that high. So I'm just saying you have to be specific to what you're looking for, and sometimes these draft experts they're doing it across the board, so that they may think he's a low grade for them because they're not running this defense, they're not running this type of scheme. So it's a little bit. It's a little bit different and tricky when you're talking about guys in the mid rounds of what the preference would be.
Yeah, I think you make a great point because, as we all know, teams draft traits. They draft things they see in players that makes them think they can work with the system they have. And it's very clear here. They want big, long,
guys.
lengthy corners. And so for them, they look at his skill set and they say, hey, there's another guy that may have similar skill sets, but this guy has a lot more length, a lot more size. We'll take him, right? And so I think that has to be considered when you're trying to evaluate how the Cowboys did this draft.
Have you seen the flea flicker? I mean, nobody runs a flea flicker in college or pro football without it getting sent to me somehow on Twitter. Like, when it happens, I'm alerted by it. Well, Tyler Fajeco?
Semi.
Tyler. Who's Tyler
Semi.
Fajeco? Oh, that's the last guy. Semi Fajeco scores a touchdown on a flea flicker. There's our guy, Nashon Wright, in the background chasing the play. So it was like, what can you do? But
it like I said, they're not right, they're not wrong, but it's the biggest discrepancy because some people will tell you Osa Odigizua, maybe they overdrafted him by 10 to 12 spots. That's nothing, Same thing with Chauncey Golston. It's like, on our show during the draft, it was like, probably not who I would have taken, but it's that range makes sense, and I can see his role in this defense. Nashon Wright was just so far out of left field for everybody. Like, I have yet to find an analyst who was not surprised by that, which again doesn't make anybody right or wrong. It's just the biggest discrepancy that I can remember in a long time.
Well, like the rivals.com and they do like the rankings for high school players. I've seen interviews where they're like, well, we had this basketball player as a 2-star, 3-star player. Well, he just committed to Duke. Well, you know what? Actually, when you look at it, he's more of a 4 or 5. You know what I mean? Like, once you see that from the back end, you're like, well, like you said, they probably looked at it again. And you guys have to look at, 4 or 5 games, maybe 2 or 3 games to say.
Well, I don't want to. I think Dane does a lot more than that, but that's Dane's career. That's all he does.
I mean, I know Broadus would look at 3 to 4 games. You're trying to look at 400 guys.
No, and that's another thing Will said Saturday is like, with this year being so weird, we leaned on 18 tape, 19 tape, 20 tape if they had it. And I'll be the first. I don't pretend to be a draft expert. I try to watch 2 games if I can find the time. Like, I don't have time to watch your entire season because it's not my job to do that.
I looked at a lot of highlights, like stuff on YouTube, but they don't put bad stuff in there, Right. But one thing about Golston I thought was interesting, though, and we talked about traits, he's a defensive end. Every one of his sacks that they showed, he's rushing from defensive tackle position. Like on so they probably have a spot for him. They're thinking, all right, you're going to play end, but on 3rd and long, you might be the tackle we use inside. So, there's different roles for these guys.
Chauncey told us he told us on Friday night, he was a Senior Bowl guy. Him, Osa, and Jabril Cox were all Senior Bowl guys. He got to Mobile, and the defensive line depth chart was just loaded, and there weren't that many defensive tackles. And he went straight to I don't know if he was with the Panthers or who, but he went straight to the coaching staff and was like, I'd like to play defensive tackle. There's more opportunity for me to get reps and get noticed and do that. Like, just move me if you want to move me. And like, that's for all my concerns about some character issues. I think they drafted a lot of like the quote unquote right kind of guys as well.
Crawford.
Oh yeah,
He just smells like Tyrone Crawford.
If you don't see, I think Odigizua and Golston, I'm like, that you're probably going to be a utility guy. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I will say this though: when you talk about the cornerback position and looking at traits, you just have to go back and look at Dan Quinn's defense in Seattle. They had Brandon Browner, who was an undrafted guy that was 6'4". You had Richard Sherman, who was 6'3" and drafted in the 5th round. Again, not guys that come out of college anybody thought were going to be great cornerbacks, but they combined with 2 really good safeties to become maybe one of the best secondaries maybe of my lifetime. So that all being said, again, this is the kind of defense he runs. Maybe he looks at it and says, they may not be what everybody else values, but I value them in my defense, and that's what matters.
Where's the Earl Thomas?
I know. I'm looking for that. We haven't gotten to that yet. We'll maybe talk about that a little later. All right, let's take our first break. When we come back, I'm going to ask these guys about the first round specifically. I want to know if the Cowboys made the right decision selecting Michael Parsons over Slater in the first round. Those were the only 2 players that were left that had been linked to the Cowboys. Cowboys went with Parsons. We'll see what you guys think about that decision when we come back. This is DallasCowboys.com radio.
Honey, big news.
Gary, are you okay?
Oh, I'm not Gary anymore. I'm Jackie Flash.
What?
See, I want the latest smartphone, but the best deals are only for new customers. So, to get a new customer deal, I changed my name to Jackie Flash.
Okay, but the best smartphone deals at AT&T are for everyone, new and existing customers.
That's huge. Then guess who's getting a deal?
Is it Jackie Flash?
Jackie Flash.
It's not complicated. At AT&T, our best smartphone deals are for everyone. Restrictions apply. Visit att.com for details.
Hi, I'm Clint Tillison with United Ag and Turf. Before you can park yourself in front of the game, park yourself in a John Deere and power through your chores. Our Land Run package is a 1025R, 25 horsepower tractor with a loader, rotary cutter, and a box blade for $229 a month. And the price you see is the price you'll pay, no surprises. So don't miss another kickoff.
Visit UnitedAgAndTurf.com. Offer ends February 1st, 2021. Restrictions apply. See dealer for details.
Now let's get to work.
The Cowboys way, where 16 Hall of Famers and 5 championships shows us what success looks like. Where turkey is always the second best part of Thanksgiving Day. Where we are all defined by one single thing, the star. where we as fans know it's our job to keep the tradition going. Bank of America is proud to be the official bank of the Dallas Cowboys and to support the quest of living life the Cowboys way.
Copyright 2020, Bank of America Corporation.
Since 1865, Stetson hats are American-made with pride right here in Texas. And Stetson is proud to be on the field with America's team. Want to show your Texas and team pride too? You can. By purchasing your own Stetson, you can look just like how the flag guys do on field at every home game. Stetson hats, the official crown of all self-respecting Cowboys and your favorite football team.
Get yours today at shop.dallascowboys.com or at stetson.com.
Back to the break.
Dallas Cowboys football, Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, dance, youth camps are back this summer for athletes and dancers of all skill levels. Save $25 with early bird pricing now through May 10th. Spots are limited. Register today at dallascowboys.com/academy.
Welcome back to the second segment of the break, live from the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star. We're presented by Geico. We're talking about the NFL draft. First round, the Cowboys were presented with an interesting prospect. They had gotten to pick 7, and at that point, they still had 4 guys left on the board with 2 picks to go before they would pick. They had 4 guys left on the board that had been linked to them. They had Horn, they had Surtain, they had Micah Parsons, and then they had Rashawn Slater. Obviously, both those cornerbacks get selected at 8 and 9, which was a bit of a shock to me. I was expecting at least one of those cornerbacks to be available to them, but they both get snatched up. Cowboys are left with a decision on, and I don't even know if it was a decision for them. It certainly was a decision as we were all looking at it, but I don't know if it was a decision for them. But they are left with choosing between Slater and Parsons. They go with Parsons. Do you guys think that was the right decision? Let's start with you, Amber.
Me personally, I think so. And I think, again, we don't know exactly what they think exactly, but I have to go back to the position and look at what position each of those guys were in. Right now, they keep saying how they feel about La'el Collins and Tyron Smith. They keep talking about feeling good about them practicing on the field and looking good, and they seem to be getting healthy and expected to be back fully for the season. So maybe they're what's the word I'm looking for? Not scared, but they're concerned. Maybe their level of concern is not as high as ours, who are looking from the outside and don't know as much information as these doctors do. But I would have to just say, because of that, the fact that they do have 2 starters expected to be back, and then you look at linebacker position, you don't quite know. I mean, you could technically kind of say the same about Leighton Van Der Esh, but maybe that's because that's why you drafted a linebacker, because of that. Maybe because of Leighton not necessarily being as healthy as you would want him to be. And then you got Jalen Smith, who you're still trying to figure out exactly what you're going to do with him, and then the depth at the position itself. So to me personally, that's how I saw it as far as position itself and the guys that you already have in your roster versus talent-wise.
Okay. Nick?
I definitely think that they made the right choice. You had the worst defense in the history of your franchise. You have the 10th pick. You got moved it to the 12th pick, and you still have the chance to draft the highest-rated defensive player on the board. I just think they owe it to themselves to do that. They've been messing with the offense for years. Offense is looking really good, but you have a chance. You need to fix the defense. You didn't do anything in free agency to really fix it, and here's the best defensive player that you have rated. I don't know where he ranks with Slater. They didn't really mention that, I don't think. But I think, like she said, there's so many question marks at linebacker. This is a position that of need right now. It's a long-term need. And, you're asking Slater to move to guard to play right now and then eventually play tackle. I'm sure he could do it. I'm sure he'd be great. But I just think you had to fix your defense. It was so terrible, and you get a dynamic player.
It's harsh for me to say that I think they made the wrong decision. I don't. At the end of the day, I don't have a ton of beef with making Micah Parsons the pick, but it's an interesting example of like there's so much more that goes into this than like here's how our board stacks up and we're just going to take the guy on top of it. Because I believe them that Micah Parsons was their highest grade. I absolutely think they would have drafted one of the cornerbacks if they had been there.
Yeah.
So you already know that they're willing to bypass grade for need. And so we don't know Rashawn Slater's grade. I think it's very reasonable to think he had a comparable, if not better one. Micah Parsons, I believe, started 13 college games before opting out. Rashawn Slater started 37. He's played all over the line. He got on people's radars because you can go watch the tape of him bullying Chase Young, who just won Defensive Player of the Year, or excuse me, Rookie of the Year, not player. And looks like he's going to be one of the best pass rushers in the league.
You're going to have to face twice.
You're going to have to face twice a year. So, like, the guy can do it, and he's probably good enough to play guard. I think he's probably better than Connor Williams if he got here today. So, like I said, boom or bust. I think Rashawn Slater would have been an absurdly safe pick. Micah Parsons has a very, very high upside in a situation that they need more. And I hesitate to use the word reach, but I think they lean toward need, and they did it throughout the draft. The week before the draft, Nick and I came on here and said, it's never 10 defensive picks to one offensive pick. Nobody does that. It's going to balance out. And it really didn't.
Did not.
They spent 8 of 11 on defense, and that to me says they were leaning toward their need. And, they would probably never say this publicly, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're sitting in that room saying, even if only 3 of these guys hit, of the 8 defenders, that's, we're reworking a third of our defense and we need that. And I don't blame them for it, because the offense should be what gets them to the playoffs. The defense needs to be respectable. So if that's what they did, I don't have a problem with it, but I have more confidence right now that Rashawn Slater will repay that pick than Micah Parsons. And again, that's not to say Micah Parsons will be a bad player, but that's just how I feel. I think Slater was a safer pick. Parsons has high upside. It's something they need a little bit more. That's all.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think the thing for me is, again, I wouldn't, as you say, I wouldn't necessarily say they made the wrong pick, because I think both these guys are talented players. I think you could see bright futures for both of them. My personal preference is, when you're taking a first-round selection, get the guy that has the greatest upside and also, in my opinion, the greatest floor. Like, I want to be as safe with this first-round pick as possible. I want a great player, but I want a great player that I feel very certain at the least is going to be really good, because he's in the first round, and especially when you're up that high, you're not going to be up that high very often. So if you tell me at 12 I'm going to be able to get a tackle that I feel like immediately comes in and is a better guard for me. So imagine that for that offensive line this year. If you actually get back Lyle Collins and Tyron Smith both healthy, and you still got you still got the guard, Zach Martin, yes,
the Hall of Famer
on the line, and you still got him, and then you plug in Slater at the other guard. I really don't care who you put at center. That is back to when the Cowboys had a dominant offensive line a few years ago. Like, that's the kind of offensive line that you now have again, and I feel very confident if those guys are healthy that your offense is going to be really, really, really good. And I don't think this defense is one player away, so I don't think that linebacker necessarily changes things. And I go back to your point, Dave, earlier about if you still manage to somehow be able to get Cox later, then you still address that position, but now your offensive line is secured not only for now, but whenever Tyron Smith decides to retire, which he's not going to play forever, whenever he decides to retire, you now got Slater just waiting there in the wings, just popping right out there to left tackle, and you're ready to roll for the next 10 years, right? So to me, I just look at it like you had more value now and in the future, and it's by far, I think, a much safer pick. I think Parsons can be great. He might end up being all-time great linebacker. Who knows? But I think there's also a chance that he busts, more of a chance that he busts than a chance that Slater busts, in my opinion.
Going back to the boomer bust thing, I mean, if Kelvin Joseph had no, character flags, whatever you want to call them, he's a first-round pick. There were people talking about him as a first-round pick anyway. As a pure football player, a lot of people think he's better right now than Trayvon Diggs was coming out. But I think him and Parsons, the ceiling is sky high. I think the floor is real low too, and that's what makes it interesting.
And that's also the thing about second, third round picks. Typically, they are guys that have skills that could make them a first round pick. There's something about them, medical or something, that makes them not be a first round pick.
Let's don't act like there's not guys on this team like that. You know, they drafted Jordan Lewis the same way. Third round pick. He was in the middle of dealing with stuff that they had to go and make phone calls about and figure out what his situation was. After they drafted him, he still had to go back to court. He still had to get charges or dropped or whatever it was, but they were confident in that. So, this team was doing their homework. They did their homework, Dave. They did their homework on Joseph.
No, that's honestly, they did. And that's a really good point, is like, we sat here after that draft and talked about Jordan, those allegations and all that stuff got dropped, and nobody has a bad word to say about Jordan Lewis as a person 4 years later. So, it is fair to give these things the benefit of the doubt. That's nobody's been charged with a crime that I'm aware of. Like, Kelvin Joseph likes to rap and partake in
way, again, is fine. It's fine if you want to be a rapper in your side time, on the side.
Right.
It can't become your main thing when you're getting paid $millions to play football.
It rubs me the wrong way. A lot of, not caring about football gets lumped in with doing literal crimes sometimes, and that's not right. So,
all right. Did you have something, Nick?
I probably shouldn't, so I'm good.
Some of the funny thing is, and this is something from working with Nick for so long, he has this little tremble that happens when he wants to say something, but he knows he shouldn't say it. And that's what I always know. When he says that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to move on because I'm not going to keep pressing because he probably shouldn't say it. All right, so we're going to take our final break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about some news that broke. There are a couple players the Cowboys are releasing, and it goes back to me to something that Stephen Jones said this weekend about why they drafted so many of these defensive players and their desire to see these rookies come in and maybe take the place of some of the higher priced vets. We're going to go through some of these positions and see what vets might be a little bit in danger as the Cowboys approach training camp and throughout training camp this year of having their jobs taken by rookies. We'll do that when we come right back. This is DallasCowboys.com radio.
Since 1865, Stetson hats are American-made with pride right here in Texas. And Stetson is proud to be on the field with America's team. Want to show your Texas and team pride too? You can. By purchasing your own Stetson, you can look just like how the flag guys do on field at every home game. Stetson hats, the official crown of all self-respecting Cowboys, and your favorite football team.
Get yours today at shop.dallascowboys.com or at stetson.com.
Honey, big news.
Gary, are you okay?
Oh, I'm not Gary anymore. I'm Jackie Flash.
What?
See, I want the latest smartphone, but the best deals are only for new customers. So, to get a new customer deal, I changed my name to Jackie Flash.
Okay, but the best smartphone deals at AT&T are for everyone, new and existing customers.
That's huge. Then guess who's getting a deal?
Is it Jackie Flash?
Jackie Flash.
It's not complicated. At AT&T, our best smartphone deals are for everyone. Restrictions apply. Visit att.com for details.
Want to use what the pros use? How about the official men's skincare brand of the Dallas Cowboys, Jack Black? Right now, you can get the Jack Black Starter, a curated collection of Cowboys locker room favorites for just $10 with free shipping. The starter includes 4 Jack Black skincare favorites plus a full-sized intense therapy lip balm. Go to getjackblack.com/Cowboys and use the code word TEAMJB. That's getjackblack.com/Cowboys. The Jack Black Starter, $10, free shipping.
We're back with a tasty treat that's sweeping airwaves and taste buds. It's new Dr. Pepper and Cream Soda. Let's take a listen.
Dr. Pepper and Cream Soda's here. A new combo that's music to my ears, okay. Let's play. Cream Soda and Dr. Pepper time. Pour it in a glass of ice.
Ah, music to my ears and mouth. New Dr. Pepper and Cream Soda.
A delicious duet.
Back to the break.
Get the ultimate fan experience for the ultimate Cowboys fan. Join Dallas Cowboys United, presented by Globe Life, starting at just $20. You can join now and get your exclusive fan pack and member benefits. Visit DallasCowboys.com/United for details.
Welcome back. It is the final segment of the break, live from the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star. We are presented by Geico. Nick, I want you to catch us up real quickly on some news that happened this morning. There were several players that have now been officially waived. Who are they?
Antoine Woods been waived. Adam Redmond, Savion Smith, Walter Palmore, Ladarius Hamilton, Kimon Hall. If you're saying who? on some of those guys. Kamon Hall was added, I think, after the season. Darius Hamilton was here from last year, like as a rookie free agent. Palmore was, I believe, added in the middle of the season when the 75 guys were in and out of the practice squad and all that stuff.
Should have mentioned their position along with their name.
Palmore is a defensive tackle.
Does it matter now?
I mean, does.
Well, it does. It does.
I mean, you're looking at depth over
You're
here.
right.
I mean, if
You're
you
right.
care about those guys in the back of the line.
I take this personally. I pride myself on knowing the roster, knowing the names, knowing the faces. It's something that I've always taken pride in. And last year, I'm in a bad spot because we didn't have access to the team. Mm-hmm. The roster restrictions were different. Guys were moving back and forth more than they ever have. We got this list earlier today. And I was like, okay, I know Antoine. Like the rest of them.
Kamon Hall's a defensive back. North Texas was never going to make the team. Ladarius Hamilton, linebacker. North Texas never going to make it. Walter Palmore, defensive tackle. He was just kind of a practice squad guy. Savion Smith, defensive back that Roethlisberger picked on at the end of the Pittsburgh game that they won the game on. Adam Redmond, center guard that they've moved back, not good enough to ever make a team or roster, not bad enough to be out of the league. They just kind of back and forth. He'll probably go to the Giants. And then Antoine Woods, defensive tackle. He signed
That's the one.
$2.1 million restrictive tender, and they decided to let him go.
Yeah.
And which is really weird because when I asked Sean Lee who's going to be some of the leaders, and he named some of the guys, but he ain't named Antoine Woods as a leader. And,
Well, I think it's really clear. Somebody mentioned it earlier in the show. I think it was you that the thing you loved about this draft is they were obviously looking for size. That's something that Antoine's not. He's not a big defensive tackle. He's a little bit shorter.
It's so weird to think because he's a big dude.
He is, but you think relatively speaking, these guys that are coming in,
he just drafted
Urban
a guy
is 6'7".
He's a small one technique. He's a small nose tackle, and he's not agile enough to be your 3 technique. He's not good in I guess for this particular defense.
Right, and that's, by the way, Antoine Woods is going to get picked up by somebody. He's going to play football in the NFL next season. I would doubt very seriously if he doesn't, and he'll be a contributor. And I think he'll be a contributor like he was with Dallas. He was never a great player here, but he was a contributing player here. So I think that's going to continue for him. He just may not be a fit for this defense.
I was surprised. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I was surprised the fact that when they did pick him up, just because how vocal he's been on social media as far as I deserve this or this. And when he starts comparing himself to other rookie or younger guys that are getting more or close to what he's making and things like that in comparison, and you clearly know that did bother him, and he felt like he was more deserving and of everything, of money, and that's fair. You got to fight for your paycheck and everything, but after hearing that, I never thought they would pick him up in the first place. Just because of that, I started sensing maybe there was some kind of discontent in there. Clearly, there was discontent. But, that's why maybe I'm not as surprised as to, maybe they were doing that to get ready for the draft in case they didn't get someone.
That's exactly what they were doing.
Yeah, I was going to just throw this to you, Dave. I mean, they issued a $2.1 million tender for him. They didn't have to do that for a restricted free agent. They did, and he signed it. And then after the draft, so what you think? I mean, it has to be part of what they got in the draft, whether it be Bohanna, Osa.
I think it's a combination. They drafted 2 pure defensive tackles and then a third guy who can play defensive tackle. So do the numbers. And then to your point, Stephen Jones is talking to anybody who will listen about how they want to get cheaper. He said. It might be a stretch, but he hopes all 11 draft picks can make the roster because that's 11 guys making pennies compared to even what Antoine was making, which that is a precarious place to be in the NFL, is when you reach the stage where you're making more money, but you're not good enough or valuable enough that you're stuck on the team. For everybody that wants to whine about Jalen Smith, he's here. His salary's guaranteed. It would kill them financially to get rid of him.
This year.
We're talking about right now.
Right now.
We're talking about right now. That's all we're talking about. Antoine Woods, as soon as they release him, they get all that money back. There's nothing guaranteed. And so, if you're in that position, and I'm not trying to come for anybody's job, but Cedric Wilson signed the same tender. They drafted a receiver. They brought in 4 undrafted guys. Noah Brown, I think he signed for $1 million. there ain't nothing guaranteed with those deals, and you better come to training camp ready because that's the type of guy they're looking to get rid of. They're not looking to get rid of Jalen Smith. They can't. They're looking to say, who here's making $1 to $5 million that we can get rid of or trade or cut or whatever that a rookie can come in and replace that production?
Better be at Dak's house.
Hell yeah.
And I bet Cedric is.
Every day.
That is a wonderful point. I mean, Cedric is one of Dak's guys, so I mean there is that to consider. But I think
negotiation.
They're what? I think they're $8 million under the cap.
Yeah.
Well,
technically, but they signed 11. They drafted 11 guys, so they're right up against it. And I'm not asking you to care about the Cowboys' financial situation, but that's stuff that they've got, and the TV money is going to kick in eventually, but not right now. Mm-hmm. So if they can do anything to buy themselves some space, they're going to do it. So, to be honest, I was a little surprised that they released Antoine so soon. Like, I thought it might happen after training camp or whenever.
Well, they did have to get below 90, and they had to get to 90, right?
The other guys they cut were, bodies. Antoine has started 32 games for this team. So
I'm a little surprised by that too. But
again, wherever you can, if you can find $2 million in space and you think you can get away with it, I'm not surprised. I'm not shocked.
Let's be clear. This also could have been a thing where maybe Antoine wanted this. Maybe Antoine and his reps talked to the Cowboys and said, hey, this is a very deep group. We'd love the opportunity to be able to be free agent. Remember, he was restricted, so he didn't have the ability really to go out there and kind of look to see where it's the best fit for him. And Cowboys may have been like, the likelihood of him making this team is probably small. We'll do him a solid and let him go out there and try to see what he can find, right? Who knows?
That might have been a conversation, because if you remember, he signed the exclusive rights free agent tag last year, which gives you even fewer, you have even fewer options under that tag, and he sort of held out. Like, he didn't sign it until right before training camp. Whereas this year he signed it, immediately he was like, yeah, I'm on board. So maybe that was a conversation of sign the tag. We'll see what happens after the draft. And
they might have known, if we get some defensive tackles, maybe we'll let you walk. Who knows? All I'm saying is I don't think we should assume that Antoine was upset with this. This could have been something that may have been more helpful for him.
Drew Rosenhaus is his agent.
Yeah.
He knows how to deal with these kind of situations, and maybe, there'll be other options for him. But I think it was more about the scheme, for him.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Let's go down the list. I'm going to name the player that got drafted, and obviously there are players at that position. I want you guys to tell me what veteran you think should be going to training camp with a renewed sense of focus, knowing that their job may be in jeopardy. Let's start with linebackers. You got Micah Parsons being drafted. You got guys Jalen Smith, Leighton Van Der Esh, Keanu Neal, who is a newcomer, Luke Gifford, Francis Bernard, Micah Parsons, and Jabril Cox being the 2 draft picks. Who are the veterans that need to be concerned?
Luke Gifford and Francis Bernard. I guess anything's possible.
It's crazy that you call them veterans.
Well, I know.
They are, but it's just crazy.
It's hard to imagine too much happening at the top of that depth chart. I mean, they could
this year,
they could cut Keanu Neal. They didn't give him that much money, but he's Dan Quinn's guy.
Is that a 1-year deal?
Yes, it's 1 year. I think only $3 million in guarantees. It's a very similar deal to what HaHa got last year.
Yeah.
So they could. But he's Dan Quinn's guy, unless he's absolutely terrible.
And unless I look at Jabril Cox as that kind of guy.
Yeah.
Jabril Cox just balls out in training camp, and Keanu Neal is not quite what they wanted or expected.
Yes.
I think that could be one that's really questionable. Right?
That's fair. But I guess I'm putting a lot of emphasis on the Dan Quinn connection. Again, Dan Quinn was super reluctant to label anybody in this defense the other night when he talked to us, but he was like, oh yeah, Keanu's going to play linebacker. He's going to do this, that, and the that's his dude. So it would surprise me, but we should mention him.
I wouldn't mention Keanu, but just because he's valuable because of the fact that he has the ability to play those 2 different positions in the secondary or linebacker in 2 areas that the Cowboys clearly have struggled with in the past year. So you never know what kind of injuries are going to happen throughout the season. You never know how any of these younger guys are going to develop into. So that's why I wouldn't say necessarily Keanu Neal, not to make the team or anything. He's someone that I know or think that he's going to definitely have a role somewhere on the defense. Now, as far as these other guys, unfortunately, I'm going to have to agree with Dave and go with Luke Gifford and Francis Bernard just because No, you know what? Screw that. No. Screw it.
Okay.
I'm going to go with Jalen.
Yeah,
I'm just going to go ahead.
It's Jalen and Leighton. I think that's the answer here.
Yeah.
Because these two guys, I'm sorry to cut you off, but these two guys that they were drafted turned both of those players, Jalen and Leighton, into contract years. This is a contract year for both of them now. So I think I would put it on them.
And I would say this, I agree with you. I don't think it necessarily means they'd be out the door this year. I do think it could mean they're out the door next year. Right? Whatever happens right now
if that's
means they could be
part
out.
of it, then absolutely, that's why those guys are here.
Yeah.
Micah Parsons and Jabril Cox are here because the linebackers have underwhelmed. Again, we love to act like it's a pure meritocracy. I don't understand how you can cut Jalen Smith in 2021.
No, you don't cut him, but there's a bench that has plenty of space.
There we
and
go.
I keep saying it. What?
No, I mean,
make the face you want, but I'm going to say it. I think, okay, with Leighton, the bad thing is you don't know injury-wise. So he might be out. Not because he's performing bad, and he struggled in some games.
Yeah, he hadn't played great either in spots.
He struggled, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because of the injuries that he's been dealing with. Because we know many of these guys still play through injuries. But Jalen, I mean, if he goes back into that whole thing where he's all over the defense and not really knowing, here comes the running back, and he got away, and the running game of the opponent, they rushed who knows how many yards. So at that point, if any of these guys show me any kind of spark, I'm saying, hey, take a break, go sit down over there, take a water break, and let's put these guys in and let's see how they do.
Well frickin' said, AG, because I hope that they've got the guts to sit Jalen and or Leighton if Parsons and or Cox is that much better. Like if Parsons is what we think he can be, and he can cover sideline to sideline in the blink of an eye and get after get downfield and sack. Like if he can do everything we think he can, he should be on the field the most of any of the three.
I will say this is something that I think, at least I had the impression when Jason Garrett was here, he was partial to vets. Like I think he got his vets and he loved his vets and he didn't want to get rid of it. He didn't want to part ways with the vets. I don't know if I know yet what Mike McCarthy is. I do think he took way too long, and maybe it wasn't his call. But I think as a team, they took way too long last year with some of those vets they brought in to make the decision to either sit them down or get rid of them because they weren't playing well. It was clear they weren't playing well, and they kept putting them out there. Maybe they felt like they didn't have a lot of other options. I don't know. But I don't know if that was because McCarthy was making that decision and he was tied to his vets and he trusted vets more than he would a young guy, or it's just a situation where he didn't think he had a lot of options. I think this will be an interesting offseason and summer for us to figure out how he feels about veterans because, we did see during training camp, they let his boy go. And so that was his guy from Green Bay that they let walk right out of the door. And so I look at it and I want to find out a little bit more about how he feels about vets because I think we pretty much know what Jason felt. I want to see how McCarthy feels about veterans.
All those guys, all of the vets were guys that Jason Garrett brought in. These two draft classes are the only ones Mike McCarthy was responsible for bringing here.
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on to the next position. We're not going to get through much of this, so we'll save some of this for next week. But let's talk about the cornerback position. Kelvin Joseph selected in the second round out of Kentucky. You've got Trayvon Diggs, Jordan Lewis, Anthony Brown, Reggie Robinson, Kelvin Joseph, and Nashon Wright obviously being the two drafted players. Who do you think should be the players that should be really worried at this point going into training camp?
I don't know. I mean, I guess, Reggie Robinson to make the team. Anthony Brown, I mean, he better play well. I mean, I'm sure they could probably part ways with that contract if they wanted to. I mean, you could throw him in that mix. Let's not forget, is Kennedy in there?
He is technically.
He's on the list.
I've been meaning to ask if he's definitely coming back. I mean, his contract told, so he's still here. But I haven't. Never met the guy. Never talked to him.
I almost forgot about him. I saw his name.
It's easy to forget about him.
And then when you just said, I was like, oh, they did bring him last year, and they had a role in mind for him.
Special teams.
Yeah, they did have a role in mind for him.
Goodwin as well for that
which
too.
is, in my opinion, the best special teams player they've had in a long time.
Right.
He's really good.
Honestly, he's the best since, and maybe even be better than Jeff Heath at special teams.
I agree.
Which
he makes plays is the point.
Yeah. Obviously, Heath's name is being mentioned. He's a guy that probably has been cut or by the Raiders. I don't think the Cowboys have interest in that right now. What?
We don't need to go backwards. Like, keep going forward. Just keep moving forward.
Only three guys picked off Mahomes last year.
I don't care. Keep moving forward. Keep going.
Yeah, moving forward, but I'm just saying if he's a backup safety that can play special teams like he should, that's what he should have been all along, not a starter. He should have been a backup player to play special teams. That's what he's really good at. But guys want to make millions, I guess, or guys that want to be a starter. But I mean, you see it in the NBA too. You see guys that are starters, but really when they get back to that role player, that's what they're better suited for. And that's what I think Jeff E's better to do, but I don't believe the Cowboys are going to go that route.
All right, Dave.
I mean, Reggie Robinson and Maurice Kennedy is probably the best answer. I do specifically wonder about Anthony Brown because, I mean, we know he can play inside and outside, but Jordan's really mainly only ever been a nickelback, and it's hard to imagine. Dan Quinn drafted a bunch of, they drafted Groot, if you're familiar with Marvel. And so it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine they're going to put a 5'10" corner on the boundary if Dan Quinn likes all these super big, super long corners. So Anthony Brown stands out to me as a guy. Like maybe he loses a starting job if Kelvin Joseph lives up to the hype. But at the same time, I just looked it up. Like you could cut or trade Anthony Brown or Jordan Lewis and get away with it, but I think they're probably more valuable to you on the team than off. Because, I think Jordan would hit you for here, I got it right here. Jordan would hit you for $4 million, and you don't save any money by doing it. Anthony Brown would hit you for $5 million, and you save $1 million. So, if you're just desperate to get them off your team, you could, but I think you'd rather just have healthy cornerbacks.
It's also about the money. I mean, what we're hearing from Steven is they want to do this because they want to be able to get
these deals wouldn't save you money the way that Antoine Woods would. It's if you're desperate to not have him here, you could do that, but I don't see that. So I think that you just having 4 or 5 quality cornerbacks is a good problem to have. And then, Reggie Robinson and Maurice Kennedy are probably maybe looking over
Reggie
their shoulders.
Robinson without even getting a shot last year on the field.
It's a cruel, it's a cold world out here, man.
On the street.
Cold world.
All right, Amber. Nick's I don't care.
Got a
Still
shot?
made more than all of us combined.
I mean, got a shot?
I know, I'm just saying. He didn't get a chance to get in the game, so
he does have,
Well, he might be a safety, honestly.
And I do think, and I had this written down here, is he a guy that maybe and I don't want to go too far into that conversation, but I think if you look at anything that the Cowboys didn't really address much in free agency or the draft, it's safety. Yeah. There's still possibly some opportunity there for some player who could step up into that role. Go ahead, Amber.
I'm gonna have to agree with what they said. When it comes to Anthony Brown, though, even though he's a guy that last year, we've been talking about him and just seeing the way he struggled on the field, it's just hard for me to imagine right now someone else kind of taking over that right now because of the amount of time, there's a learning curve that needs to happen there. So just the fact that he is a veteran and has those game, I'm not going to say, he's going to be the best player or the best cornerback or anything, but because of his experience, I think that's still valuable. So it's just going to come down to Kennedy and these guys that haven't really done much. And unfortunately, you have to say bye to some of them.
All right. That's a wrap. We're going to be back next week, and we'll get into some of these other positions. We have more that we got to go through. We'll talk about defensive tackle, defensive end, offensive line. There's more to get to there, maybe wide receiver. And we'll talk about some positions maybe like the safety position that the Cowboys have not addressed enough in free agency or the draft and what the Cowboys should do there. We'll do all that when we come back next week. Till then, for Nick Keatman, Dave Hellman, Amber Garcia, I am Derek Eagleton. This has been The Break, live on DallasCowboys.com radio.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys?